Welcome back to the BlackTrack, where I do commentary and review on movies with an all-black cast, or at least a black lead. I've been dreading doing today's video for a while now, because what can I say about the movie Friday that hasn't already been said? Everybody who's watching this video right now has seen Friday at minimum 50 times. Before the 3 people who've never seen it, I'm gonna do my damnedest to make this video as entertaining and informative as possible. This might be hard to believe, but this time next year, the movie Friday will be almost 30 years old. That's insane. 1995's Friday was written by Ice Cube and his friend DJ Pooh, following a series of movies where the pair felt only the negative side of West Coast hoods were being portrayed. In their mind, there was a side not being shown, the everyday, non-violent side that Cube and his friends experienced growing up. In hindsight, their timing couldn't have been worse, and they had trouble shopping the film around. So much so that Cube and producer Patricia Charbonnet ended up raising around $50,000 themselves to try to get the movie made independently. Luckily, Studio New Line Cinema not only stepped in to give the movie a bigger budget, but also more surprisingly gave them full creative control over the movie with no intervention. That's practically unheard of in Hollywood, especially with a new and unproven project. New Line Cinema's only request was that Ice Cube pick a different co-star other than DJ Pooh, who was originally supposed to play the best friend Smokey in the movie. They ended up replacing him with up-and-coming comedian Chris Tucker, who without a doubt was integral in making this movie what it became. Friday was directed by F. Gary Gray, who was a well-known music video director around this time. The movie was filmed in only 20 days and is often labeled as a stoner comedy, but I hate that label because it's so much more than that. Yeah, weed is a large part of the plot, but it's more of a buddy comedy in my eyes. The story is very simple. It's a day in the life of Craig Jones, played by Ice Cube, and all the ridiculousness that can go down on a random block on a random Friday. It sounds basic, but don't let that fool you. A lot of movie is stuffed into that premise. When I say Friday has an all-star cast, I mean it has a hell of a cast. Almost too many to name. We got Ice Cube, Chris Tucker, Bernie Mac, John Witherspoon, Nia Long, Tiny Lister, AJ Johnson, Faison Love. It just goes on and on and on. But funny enough, all of these people, who are household black names now, were not considered stars at the time this movie was filmed, with this being the first film for many in the cast. Friday is considered an absolute classic by many, but does the film hold up as well as you might think 28 years later? Let's BlackTrack and find out. Let me start out by bringing up the fact that once again, there's 2 different versions of this movie, the director's cut and the theatrical cut. The differences aren't as egregious as they were in a movie like, say, Eve's Bayou, but I'm definitely an advocate for the theatrical version. The reason being is that it just makes for a tighter and better paced movie. Most of what you remember about Friday comes from the theatrical version. The director's cut, on the other hand, adds a bunch of unnecessary dialogue on top of what you already know and ruins the rapid-fire pace of the film. However, the director's cut does do one thing right, and that's the beginning. There's an extended intro where we see Tiny Lister as Devo sleeping in his garage surrounded by a bunch of bikes, which becomes important later. We see AJ Johnson as the crackhead Ezell running away with likely stolen goods. We see how much of a dick Ron Reiser is as Stanley, spraying water on 2 kids, one of which is a very young Megan Good in her first film. And finally, we see Chris Tucker as Smokey, doing a little wake and bake. This little bit of character building is minor, but does a really good job of introducing you to some of the characters. But don't get too used to that, because this is the only thing that the director's cut does right. With the theatrical cut, you get right into the Jones household, where we get quick introductions of the family members Craig, his sister Dana, and Mr. and Mrs. Jones. The reason I like the director's cut over this intro is because the Jones family really isn't that interesting to me. It sounds crazy, but aside from Craig, they are the least interesting people in this film. Dana, played by Regina King, oh I'm sorry, that's Academy Award winner Regina King to you, is kind of a pain in the ass to Craig. I know it's the annoying sibling trope, but did she have to be so unlikable? Question, do women still sleep like this? Or did bonnets finally liberate y'all? Mr. Jones, played by the late John Witherspoon, is the second most likable and has the most memorable lines.
Every time I come in the kitchen, you in the kitchen.
Unfortunately, the director's cut ruins this too, because it drags the dialogue out forever, whereas in the theatrical cut, it's far shorter and how you remember it. It feels like a compromise because director F. Gary Gray said that the comedians pretty much ad-libbed all their lines and had a tendency to drag on in the scene. So I guess he wanted some of their material to get through to the director's cut. And get this, the scene is actually longer because there's an even more extended version of this that was deleted. Mama Jones doesn't serve much of a purpose, but just to make the family complete. That was actually the selling point for Anna Marie Horsford, who plays Mrs. Jones, because when she was shown the script, one of the reasons she liked it was because it was a complete family. Traditionally in these type of films, it was almost always a broken home, so this was another way that Friday wanted to make itself different. The catalyst for this entire day is Craig being fired from his job, on his day off no less, and it's kind of funny that it's never revealed exactly how he lost it. At no point in the movie does he ever confirm or deny that he did what he was accused of. I mean, he kind of admits it when he says,
"Supervisor called me about 4 o'clock, talking about they got me on videotape stealing boxes."
Man, I know you ain't go out like that.
Hell no. They ain't got me on tape. She said they did. Fired me on the spot.
But the movie never reveals the truth, only turns it into a punchline.
What the fuck you doing stealing boxes for? What, you trying to build a clubhouse?
I think this is great because it's one of those things that adds to the lore of the movie. It gives the characters some kind of history, as if you're stepping into the middle of an ongoing story. That's really all this movie is, an assortment of random character stories that all just seem to intersect with each other. It's nothing new, but rarely is every character creative and interesting. It's not like they had to work hard at it either, since every character is just exaggerated versions of people that the writers and the director already knew. Well, maybe Angela Means had to work hard at it, because she's barely recognizable as the freeloader Felicia, a girl who spends all day begging for outlandish things.
See, I was hoping that I could take it to the house with me.
My microwave?
Yeah.
If you forgot, I last talked about Angela Means back when I did the House Party 3 BlackTrack. She was Kid's fiance Vita. The casting director absolutely did not want her to get this role because she was considered, quote, too pretty. But Means lobbied hard to get the part, even using some of her comedian connections. I feel some kind of way about that. It's not explicitly stated that she's a crackhead, but it's implied because F. Gary Gray said he based the character off of female neighborhood crackheads he grew up with called Strawberries. What's too pretty for a crackhead supposed to mean? Is a crackhead supposed to have a specific complexion? Don't answer that, I already know the answer. Oh, and if you weren't aware, this is where the line,
"Bye, Felicia,"
comes from. None of these characters are as important to this movie as Chris Tucker as Smokey though. Friday would have been a completely different movie without him. The story goes that Chris Tucker bombed the initial audition, and that was not the move, because he wasn't even the first choice. Don't laugh, but New Line Cinema actually considered Chris Rock in the role after rejecting DJ Pooh. How would that have sounded? I don't do a good Chris Rock, but I can only imagine. "Craig, I know you don't smoke, but I'ma get you high today, cause you ain't got nothing to do." If it wasn't for the fact that Chris Tucker had just done a classic set on Def Comedy Jam, he never would have gotten called back. The cast all give different reasons for why Tucker sucked in the audition. Everything from he didn't think an Ice Cube comedy would be successful, to the fact that he just got off tour. Whatever the reason, it was Angela Means and Faison Love who convinced him to come back because, as they put it, they're literally giving you the role. Smokey is your typical weed head who doesn't take anything serious. He's an excellent counter to Craig because he always calls him out on his BS, but because he can't take anything serious, he's the reason they always end up in trouble. Case in point, he's supposed to be selling some weed for his supplier Big Worm, but is struggling to do so. Gee, I wonder why. For what reason would a guy nicknamed Smokey have trouble selling the smoke?
I don't think you applying yourself, Smokey.
Yeah, I'm sure that's the reason. Big Worm is played by Faison Love, 2 years after Fear of a Black Hat, and he puts everything into this role, despite, as he puts it, being paid only around $3,000 for the role. He wanted this so bad that he actually showed up to the audition in character as Big Worm and never broke. This criminal element is needed in this film because even though they wanted to go in a different direction, you can't just pretend that crime doesn't exist. Hey, the neighborhood can't be that dangerous, not if Debbie, played by Nia Long, can run up and down the street unbothered. This might be the most unrealistic part of the movie. Ain't no way she running down this street without a single Negro going, hey, black shorts, come here. I know y'all like my West Coast accent. Only a few months before the release of Friday, a movie named Clerks was released. It's about a guy who has one of the worst days ever while working at a convenience store, and it was famously filmed entirely in black and white. F. Gary Gray admits to being inspired by this film when directing Friday, and came real close to filming the entire movie in black and white. I can't say if it would have worked or not, but I lean more towards it not working, because the colors give the movie a distinct look to me. I bring this up because we get a taste of what the black and white would have looked like in a flashback scene, where we get properly introduced to the neighborhood bully Debo, played by the late Tiny Lister, and Red, played by co-writer DJ Pooh. He made the fatal mistake of letting the one sketchy guy in the neighborhood hold his bike. You know the guy, the one that says he's just going around the corner and he'll be right back, but is halfway to Atlanta by the time you realize something is wrong? Oh my bad, this is California. Halfway to San Diego, I guess. The audacity of Red to ask for his property back. Rest in peace, Red. Oh, he's not dead, it's just...
You got knocked the fuck out!
The late Ronaldo Ray wants none of this. The house this was filmed in front of was F. Gary Gray's childhood home. And if you look close enough, you'll see Michael Clark Duncan in his first movie. I love hearing F. Gary Gray talk about the somewhat guerrilla filmmaking they did for Friday. He mentions that everybody on the block that most of the movie was filmed on was cool with the movie being done, except for one person, which I'll come back to later. But when they wanted to film stuff outside that block, they were more cautious because they never knew what would happen on unfamiliar turf. It's also the reason that the majority of the cast wears some variation of black or blue. The costume designer wanted to avoid red at all costs. It's also why this scene in the convenience store had to be filmed with the quickness. Gary Gray already set a 2-take minimum for all the scenes, but he says he did the store scene in less than 20 minutes so that they could get the hell out of there. He definitely likes a challenge because he makes a cameo in the scene, and it's far harder to direct when you're in front of the camera than behind it. If you were watching the theatrical version, this is when you would have gotten properly introduced to the crackhead Ezell. It works all the same. He still comes across like a thief and an opportunist. If you haven't noticed by now, a lot of the people in this movie was also in House Party 3. AJ Johnson, Angela Means, Ronaldo Ray, Chris Tucker, and another soon-to-be-seen character. And on top of that, many of the cast was also in Boys in the Hood, including Ice Cube, Regina King, and Nia Long. On top of already being friends, it's probably the reason the cast had so much chemistry. One more quick funny story about AJ Johnson. Prior to filming House Party 3, Johnson played a parody of Eazy-E called Sleazy E for the F with Dre Day video. This was during the Dre and Snoop Dogg vs. Eazy-E beef of 1993. I don't know if Eazy-E knew that Johnson played a character making fun of him or not, but somehow Johnson ended up playing the same character in the Eazy-E's response video, Real MF&Gs. I like to think that AJ Johnson had no intention of picking a side and just saw a way to get double the paper. F. Gary Gray claims this is based off people in his old neighborhood, but I for damn sure ain't never had no Miss Parker in my neighborhood. Miss Parker is played by former Price is Right Barker beauty Kathleen Bradley. She was the first permanent black Barker beauty on the show, and it was her appearance on there that led to her getting the role of Miss Parker in Friday. Bernie Mac shows up for far too small of a role as a crooked pastor and immediately begins fellowshipping with Miss Parker while her husband is out. I never saw a man get to the Showcase Showdown so fast. Being a pastor has to be like the top 3 best job to have when you're up to no good. All throughout the movie, Chris Tucker has been twitching and tweaking, and yeah, he's full of more gas than a Ford Explorer, but it's clearly something else going on. It's great how the movie keeps the gag going until 30 minutes in when it finally explains what's going on. Turns out, he was smoking with some local Mexicans and they laced his weed with angel dust, and he hasn't been the same since. Forget all of that for a second though. Remember earlier when I said that most people were cool with them filming except one person? Well, there was this one guy who was constantly drunk and yelling out all kinds of obscenities during filming. He refused to cooperate, and while trying to film this scene, he decided he was just not going to go in his house until they were done. They said to hell with it and just filmed it with him in the scene. So if you look closely in the background, you'll see this dude just casually sitting in front of his house. It actually makes it look more natural to me, because why would the neighborhood be empty even at night? I never understood why they let Debo just run over them like this. It's not like he's gang affiliated or anything. Why wouldn't they just jump him instead of letting him frisk them like it's a detainment? He'd have to whip my ass every day. I'ma earn my respect. I love that Friday treats the day like it's a normal day where multiple things are going on at once. Debo pressures Smokey into breaking into neighborhood snob Stanley's house. Somebody keeps calling Craig's house and hanging up. and Mr. Parker comes home and catches the good Reverend spinning Miss Parker's big wheel. It makes the neighborhood feel like things are constantly alive at all times, instead of feeling like things are just happening in a sequence from scene to scene. Smokey finally pressures Craig into smoking weed, and his reaction is about how I envision my reaction would be, because I ain't never got high either. All my knowledge of it comes from people I know, and movies like this. I might not know anything about weed, but I know enough to know that people who smoke don't like freeloaders like Felicia begging ass. When talking about this scene, Angela Means brings up something I never noticed. Originally, she was just supposed to stay off the porch and pretend to talk to the guys, but in reality just talking to the camera, like how everybody else does. But she felt like it took too long to do it that way, so she made the decision to just sit in between them without their prior knowledge to get their real reactions. She was right, because the off-guard reaction makes it look like they really couldn't stand her. Ah, hell no. Craig starting to hallucinate and See, I got too many responsibilities for all that. Even though I'm not an expert, I know it's a such thing as a wrong time to smoke, and Craig and Smokey picked the wrong time. First, Debbie shows up to see Dana, and if I haven't mentioned it yet, Craig has a crush on her. Look at Doughboy, finally getting a chance to make her his lady. Then Big Worm shows up looking for his money or his weed, not necessarily in that order, and Smokey doesn't have the answers, so he threatens to kill both him and Craig by 10 o'clock tonight. As if that's not enough, the person who's been calling and hanging up is Craig's actual girlfriend, who I haven't mentioned up until now, but who he can't stand. But guess who shows up to the house while Debbie is there?
Boo! Where Craig at?
Ooh.
But hey, at least Smokey got to set up some action for later with one of Debbie's homegirls, and apparently she looks just like Janet Jackson. The weed giveth, but mostly taketh on this day. Craig's girlfriend Joy is played by Paula Jai Parker in her first major movie. She's had a long and successful career, and I've always been a big fan of hers, but I feel like she never got that career-defining role. She's one of the few people in this movie not really remembered for this character. I say that, but the character recently came into relevance again when a bunch of people my age discovered that because of crappy VHS quality, we completely missed that a whole nigga was in her bed in the beginning of the film when she was accusing Craig of cheating. Gotta love HD. Something else I was always in the dark about is why Smokey's mother hates him so much. First off, for the longest time, I always felt like she looked more like his sister than his mother. Randomly, Smokey has to use the bathroom. I guess it's a side effect of all that weed. But why doesn't he have a house key? He's a grown man. I've had a house key since I was like 10. Either his mother truly hates him, or he's such an unreliable screw-up that she doesn't even want him to be in the house when she's not there. Even Mr. Jones won't let him use the toilet. What's a man supposed to do? Now, I've never been in this situation before, but I'll say this. If I was, I'd do a better job at hiding than this. There's a fenced-in backyard right there. Why would you squat right next to your neighbor's driveway? And who the hell is gonna clean that up?
All right, man, but look, between me and you, man, when you're done, I'll clean all that shit up for you for $2.
Oh, you know what I'm learning? It pays to have at least one crackhead in the community for basic necessities. Ew, you definitely didn't wash your hands. Craig and Smokey can't come up with the $200, despite several close calls. So Craig goes to get his heater to hopefully even the odds. The gun scene was always weird to me. I mean, it makes sense that he would go get it, but what doesn't make sense is why he has it in the first place. Craig doesn't strike me as the type of guy who even knows how to use a gun, and there's nothing to suggest that he even needed it before today. Even Smokey was confused by it early in the film, because obviously Craig isn't built like that, which sounds funny to say, considering this is Ice f***ing Cube. I feel like it should have belonged to his father. Then him finding it and this little speech would have made more sense.
When I was growing up, this was all the protection we needed. You win some, you lose some. But you live to fight another day.
You know what? I gotta give it to DJ Pooh for being willing to take a much smaller role as Red. It might be a minor character, but he's still a part of two of the funniest scenes in the movie. He comes over later when he gets off work. Bold of him with his face looking like this, by the way.
Damn! Put your glasses back on.
And he runs into Debo again. Once again, it's 3-on-1 now. And while I'm on the topic, Debo has a squeaky bike, red squeaky bike, that you can hear a mile away. Just run, goddammit. There's a house right there. I doubt Debo has the patience to knock the door down. I do like Debo's theme song though. Sounds like Jaws is coming or something. Anyway, back to Red. I guess he thought he was being slick by just tucking in his chain, but a seasoned thief like Debo is too smart for that. I truly believe this man would do a full cavity search if he thought he'd find something.
You gonna cry in the car.
I feel bad for Red, man. I hope the post office or UPS or wherever the hell he works is paying him enough to move the hell out of town. Once again, I love the fact that DJ Pooh is able to play a self-deprecating character that's constantly on the tail end of bad situations. This is the very definition of taking one for the team, because he could have easily just walked away from the film entirely. It's been so much going on that everybody just kind of forgot about Janet Jackson. The car pulls up and Craig and Smokey initially think that Big Worm might be just a little too punctual. But nah, it's Debbie's friend Rita that Smokey was trying to get at. And well, was the sound effect really that necessary? And look, I know the big girl jokes don't fly now. I know this and respect it. But looking at it from a 1995 perspective, it's funny as hell. It helps that the late Yvette Wilson is a good sport about it, being a comedian herself, and she and Chris Tucker play off each other so well that it surpasses any negative sensibilities you might have about it now.
Don't ever come by here.
You know, this movie does a great job of hiding the lower budget, except when it gets towards the end and we see that lighting a scene is an underrated skill. It always threw me off walking in on this movie in the middle because they had to find a way to light this little room without you seeing the lights, but it's also supposed to be nighttime. So they just said to hell with it and lit it from the outside, making it look like daytime. I just always thought that was funny. Hey, maybe Big Worm forgot about the whole thing. Drug dealers are busy, you know.
Hey, who is that?
It ain't them niggas that act hard. It's the niggas that be it's the ones to put the slugs.
Well, how was I supposed to know he was gonna delegate? I think Friday might be the first movie I've ever seen to make a drive-by shooting funny. I'm not even concerned for Craig and Smokey. Like, there's no way either of them get hit in this movie. And I'm glad, because with the way these guys are spraying indiscriminately towards this house, Craig's whole family would have been dead in a serious hood movie. You can just tell that the whole neighborhood knows that they got plot armor too, because they just casually come outside like there's no chance these guys are going to spin the block. Nobody calls the cops or nothing. The neighborhood at least tries to look for Craig and Smokey, but they don't get mourned for long, because the more pressing issue is the fact that Debo doesn't discriminate and puts hands on Felicia. Oh, come on, dude. She's the most harmless person in the movie, but I guess a villain is a villain. Debbie stands up for her sister. And wait, did I remember to mention that Felicia was her sister? I don't remember. Well, if I didn't, it's her sister, and she's got more balls than every man in this movie. At least she's willing to stand on her principles and take a blow for her blood. Nobody else is. Perhaps the men just needed a little more motivation, like the fact that Craig likes Debbie. The eventual fight that he and Debo get into, I thought was decent and realistic enough, but F. Gary Gray doesn't feel the same way. It's probably the one thing in the movie that he does hate. He said that he wishes it was a bit longer and more intricate. He had all kinds of plans and props for it. What was this man trying to do that was better than what we got? I would love to see a storyboard on that. To play devil's advocate, Big Bad Debo being taken out by a simple brick is kind of a letdown, but at this point, you just want everybody to get their happy ending. Red gets his bike back, Craig gets a date with Debbie, and Smokey gets out of trouble with Big Worm. How convenient that everybody just happens to be there too. Cause why would Red even be there? Where'd he come from? Did he buy a ticket to the fight or something? But wait a minute. Hey, what if Debo had beef with Worm? What would happen? Would Debo punk out, or would he go toe-to-toe with Big Worm? Tiny Lister used to be a wrestler. That's a matchup I think I want to see. Let's get to the grade. There's so much that could be said about Friday that I'll never be able to cover in one video. Friday is the quintessential black comedy, but it's so much more than just being labeled a black comedy. It felt like there was a little bit of a gap after the classic comedy Coming to America came and went. Then along came Friday, seemingly out of nowhere, to completely change what a funny black movie was. If you are unconvinced of just how much of an impact Friday had on black comedies, then consider the fact that it created an entirely new genre of movies and spawned a bunch of copycats. Any black comedy after 1995 either tried to blatantly copy Friday's formula or borrow multiple aspects of the movie. Don't believe me? Just watch any black comedy movie, even to this day, and tell me that there isn't a Friday influence. Still unconvinced? Then think about the fact that the success of the film launched or relaunched the careers of almost every single person in the film. Without Friday, Ice Cube wouldn't have been taken as serious as he was as a filmmaker in Hollywood. And most of all, without Friday, I doubt Chris Tucker would have been the major star and triple threat that he became. This film made him. Still not convinced? Okay then, think about how many lines from the film have become part of the black vernacular and the black experience. He gon' cry in the car, give me 3.5 minutes, maybe even 4. Every time I'm in the kitchen, you in the kitchen. You got knocked the F out. My grandma gave me that chain. And you know this man. I can go on and on and on and on. You probably use lines from Friday without even thinking about the fact that it comes from Friday. It's safe to say that the movie has stood the test of time and is still laugh out loud funny even 28 years later. It's kind of impressive seeing as nobody who worked on the film, from the cast to the director, thought it would be good, but somehow they managed to capture a piece of black culture in a bottle and forever changed how we view black comedies. The story itself isn't groundbreaking, but the characters, the writing, and the pacing all came together to form a timeless film. That's why my grade for Friday is an A+. I judge people who don't have at least one copy of Friday in their possession because it's a classic and mandatory viewing. And that's it for this episode of the BlackTrack. Let me know your go-to Friday lines in the comments below. And if you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell your friends about my channel. And until next time, I'll holla at you.